Mem Zayin and Beis, 7 lines from the bottom. We'll start over the Gemara. We started in the middle of yesterday. Yeah. Okay. The Gemara is looking now for what is the source, where is the original derivation that both a Nazir and a Kohen Gadol become tamei to a meis mitzvah, someone who has nobody to bury them. So the Gemara says, what's the source? Because the rabbis taught, Akol nafshes meis lo yavai. The Kohen Gadol does not become tamei to any dead bodies. But what's the pasuk talking about? Again, this is talking about a Kohen Gadol. So a Kohen Hedit, a regular Kohen, is prohibited to become tamei except for 7 relatives. A Kohen Gadol is not allowed to become tamei to anybody, not to his mother and father. That's the pasuk says. A kol nafshis meis, on no person can become tamei, not even his mother and father. So what is a kol nafshis meis? What's that referring to? If it's talking about non-relatives, so then we would presumably know that non-relatives are included. Just like a regular kohen, a kohen headed that's allowed to become tamei to 7 relatives cannot become tamei to random strangers. If Kohen Gadol can't even become tamei to his father or mother or any one of his other 7 relatives, certainly he can't become tamei to distant strangers. When the Torah says on he can't become tamei to any person, those any people are the 7 relatives. Okay. Well, now that I know it's referring to the 7 relatives, and why does the Torah need to specify?
Rabbi, I'm sorry, page position, please.
Right now we are on 1 second. Second to bottom line, Mem Zayin and Beis. The Torah is talking about 7 close relatives. If that's the case, that the Torah specifically prohibits Kohen Gadol from becoming tamei to the 7 relatives, then why does it need to specify a father and a mother? So what does that mean? So the Torah is coming to say, the example of the father is actually coming to tell you that you can't become tamei to a father, but you could become tamei to a meis mitzvah. Okay.
It doesn't actually say he can become contaminated from a stranger body. I mean, it's an implication, I guess, from the way it's stated. I mean, is it actually in so many words? It's kind of, I don't know.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. Correct. It is an implication for the fact that Torah writes an extra words. Okay. What about his mother, Yomi? What does that come to tell me? It's come to teach me a comparison, like the Rebbe, like the message that Rebbe taught. What was that? Tanya Rebbe and Rebbe says, Gabi Nazir, with regard to Nazir, the Torah teaches, he can't become tamei to them when they're dead. But he could become tamei to a person for tumah hayotzim negof, zav zava nidi eladas, mitzara. Any one of those five categories, he can become tamei to. The prohibition of tumah is only on tumas meis. The only el benazir. I only know that that's true by Nazir. The Kohen Gadol minayin. How do I know it's true by Kohen Gadol? Amrit. So I say lo yomer ima b'Kohen Gadol. It doesn't need to say ima, a mother, by Kohen Gadol. She'ein Talmud loymer she'rekal b'chaymerhu, because I know it. How do I know? In other words, if I know that a Kohen Gadol becomes tamei to his father, I know he can also become tamei to his mother. How do I know that? Let's examine this. A Kohen Gadol, a regular Kohen, is only allowed to become tamei to a brother from his father, not a brother from his mother. So if a Kohen is allowed to become tamei to his brother from just his father, paternal brother, the Kohen Gadol is not allowed to even become tamei to his father. By Kohen Hedyot, Kohen Hedyot, in a scenario where a Kohen Hedyot is not allowed to be, a regular Kohen cannot become tamei to a maternal brother, certainly a Kohen Gadol wouldn't be able to become tamei to his mother. In other words, we find with regard to Tumah that we give more significance to a relationship from the father's side than the mother's side. And therefore, it certainly would be the case that a Kohen Gadol should become tamei to his, if a Kohen Gadol would become tamei to his father, he certainly would become tamei to his mother. So therefore, the word ima is extra. Im zechisa mehadin, if you can learn it out of Kal Chaimer, ma tamid leimer imai. So why does the Torah need to say imai? The Kohen Gadol, mufne, it's extra. Lahakash v'lodin imenu gzera shava. Teach me to equate the laws of Kohen Gadol with the laws of Nazir. Nemer ima ben Nazir. It says by Nazir that he can't become tamei to anybody, and also says he can't become tamei to his mother. Nemer ima ben Nazir. So the imai by Nazir is extra. And nemer ima ben Kohen Gadol, and it says a mother by Kohen Gadol. Ma imai amar ben Nazir ben Ma'aseh ein tamav mitmehul negam lusavasam. Just like with regard to Nazir, we say that a Nazir can't become tamei to a Nazir cannot become tamei to his mother, but he could become tamei to a mitzvah or a zav and idia ledes. So we learn from there that the Kohen Gadol's prohibition of becoming tamei extends just to tumas meis and not to zav and idia ledes mitzvah. Any one of those 5 types of tumah is not prohibited. It's only tumas meis, the tumah of a deceased body. Okay, so now we've explained Kohen Gadol. Yeah. Now, what's the source that a Nazir could become tamei to a meis mitzvah? Nazir minol, the Tanya we learned, kol yomei hazir el Hashem al nefesh meis lo yavi. All the days that he's a Nazir, he can't become tamei al nefesh meis lo yavi. 1 second. Again, the Tanya we learned, kol yomei hazir el Hashem al nefesh meis lo yavi. As long as he's a Nazir, he can't become tamei. Shemeani, afilu nefesh behema b'mashma. I would think that when Torah uses the word nefesh, the word nefesh is also associated with a behema, with an animal. For example, as the Torah says, "Shenemar maka nefesh behema yishalmeno." If somebody kills an animal, call it nefesh. You also have the prohibition of dam, of consuming blood. Jews not allowed to consume blood of an animal. That's why we salt our meat. That's why our meat is so salty. The Torah also says ki hadam hu hanefesh, because the blood of an animal is called a nefesh. So I would think that when Torah says a Nazir cannot become tamei, he can't even become tamei to an animal. Talmud loimer al nefesh meis, the nefesh of a deceased. An animal is not called a mace. An animal isn't called a deceased, it's called an avela, a corpse. So therefore, if the Torah says nefesh meis, that's a clear indication that we're not talking about an animal. A Nazir could obviously become tamei to an animal. But nefesh adam akosam medaber. Rabbi Shmuel says, "Ain't it tzarich? It's not necessary to derive from the word mace. Hareo omer lo yavai. He shouldn't become tamei. We're talking about a person who creates tumah in ba'oil, so you can enter tumah. Whereas with an animal, it's not the case. You have to touch it. It's not possible to come into tumah. You have to touch the tumah. Okay.
Well, how do you get tumah from the animal?
So certain animals become tamei if they weren't slaughtered correctly. A properly slaughtered animal does not become tamei.
Oh, okay.
It would be an avela that would become
Oh,
tamei, and only be certain types. Okay, so we have two alternatives. Regardless, if how we know that a nazir, the tumah of a nazir is talking about the tumah of human beings, either it's because it says not nefesh mace or because it says lo yavai. Okay, so that's why I know a nazir can't become tummy to anybody. It says 1 second, get the full pasuk here. Okay, if you have a fancy Gemara, it's the second note in the Torah. I'll just read it out loud. To a father or to a mother, a brother or a sister. Because the Nizir is on his head. As long as it's a Nazir, it can't become Tameh to a father, a mother, a brother, or sister. Now, the previous verse says, Kol Yemei Hezir Hashem, all the days that he's a Nazir, Al Nefesh Meis Lo Yovai. He won't become Tameh to anybody. That's the first verse. So then the Torah goes ahead and specifies 4 examples: a father, a mother, a brother, or a sister. Now, obviously, those four examples are extra. Why does the Torah need to specify? The Torah says you can't become Tameh. Obviously, those 4 examples are included. Obviously, if you can't become Tameh, you can't become Tameh to a father, a mother, brother, or sister. Why would I think otherwise? So now obviously, those 4 things are going to teach me 4 different laws with regard to Nazir. Okay. So we're 5 lines above the wide lines at the end of the line. He doesn't become Tameh to his father or mother, but he does become Tameh to a Meis Mitzvah. That's the implication. Okay. The Gemara is saying, why do I need a pasuk? Why can't I say that I can compare it to a Kal V'chomer? If we look at a Kohen Gadol, he has a permanent sanctification, right? He's a Kohen, his kids are Kohen, he's forever a Kohen Gadol. Mitmel Meis Mitzvah, he becomes Tameh to a Meis Mitzvah. Nazir she'ein kedushas kedushas olam ein edin shemitmel Meis Mitzvah. Certainly, if the Nazir isn't a permanent sanctification, typically a Nazir is 30 days. So then certainly it should be the case that he could become Tameh to a Meis Mitzvah. So Gemara says no. I would say that Kohen Gadol is exclusive. Only Kohen Gadol could become Tameh to a Meis Mitzvah. Why? Because the Kohen Gadol, in some way, the severity of it it's less severe for a Kohen Gadol to become Tameh. Because if he becomes Tameh, he does not bring a korban, a sacrifice, on his tumah. Tameh Nazir, but in a certain sense, Nazir is more severe. Shemevi korban al tumasei. Halo mevi korban al tumasei lo yitmel meis mitzvah. Since he has to go through a rectification process, therefore, I would think maybe only Kohen Gadol becomes Tameh, but not a Nazir. Talmud Leimer, therefore, the Torah has to say la'avul ima la'itam avul meis mitzvah, avul mitmel meis mitzvah. Therefore, the Torah needs to say that he doesn't become Tameh to his father or mother, but he does become Tameh to a Meis Mitzvah. Okay, the Gemara says maybe alternatively, maybe I would think that actually, when the Torah says a Nazir can't become Tameh, it means a Nazir is only prohibited to becoming Tameh to these 4 people. Maybe a Nazir can become Tameh to the whole world, except for his father, mother, brother, or sister. What would the logic in that be? The logic is very simple. Look at anyone who's sitting Shiva. What's the most painful people to sit Shiva for? A mother, father, brother, or sister. So the logic would sort of be that the Torah doesn't want him to be too much in pain. So that's the Torah says don't become Tameh to these 4 people. But anybody else, maybe you could become Tameh to them. So I'm with Kal V'chomer. I would say it's a Kal V'chomer. That's obviously not the case. Why would I say that? If you have a regular Kohen, he cannot become Tameh to anybody in the world, except for 7 relatives. But 7 relatives, he could become Tameh. So Nazir she'ein mitmel l'kroivim, if a Nazir is prohibited even specifically 4 of those 7 relatives, ein adin, it should certainly be the case, shelo yitam l'shar mesim. Certainly, it would be the case that a Nazir can, if the Nazir is prohibited from those 4 kroivim, those 4 relatives, certainly he'd be prohibited to everybody else. No different than a Kohen. In other words, you see with regard to Kayin, the Torah doesn't make this difference. And therefore it makes sense that to include all relatives in the category of al nefesh meis lo yafai, that the Kayin cannot become tamei to any person. In other words, everyone's included. So what's specific about a father or mother? Specifically, a father or mother can't become tamei, but he could become tamei to a meis mitzvah. Okay. Let's give me a moment here. Okay. So Gemara says, let's observe this a little closer. Maybe we can make this point with the Kal V'chomer. What does that mean? Nemer Klolos b'Kohen Gadol. There are general rules that are applied to Kohen Gadol. Nemer Klolos b'Nazir, and there are rules that apply to Nazir. Ma Klolos Amuris b'Kohen Gadol l'Avveinu mitam avamitim l'Meis Mitzvah. Av Klolos Amuris b'Nazir l'Avveinu mitam avamitim l'Meis Mitzvah. 1 second. Okay. In other words, according to the first opinion, the Gemara here is not trying to prove that a Nazir becomes tummy to a meis mitzvah from Kohen Gadol, because that we said is not provable, because we said in some way Nazir is more severe than Kohen Gadol. What the Gemara here is trying to say is that the Gemara is trying to sort of weigh a question. Should we say that al nefesh meis lo yavai, when the Torah gives a general prohibition of Nazir, I know that includes everything. And therefore, la'avul imay must be extra. Tell me that he becomes tamei to a meis mitzvah, which is exactly like we learned. That's one possibility. Okay. Or possibly, let's try to analyze it differently. Nemer clause b'kayin hedyet, v'nemer clause b'nazir. It says rules by kayin hedyet. It says rules by nazir. Ma clause amuris b'kayin hedyet, mitmel aviv. Af clause amuris b'nazir, mitmel aviv. Okay. So again, so the first stop, the Gemara is trying to examine: does the Torah actually need to say la'aviv on its own or not? If we compare Nazir to Kohen Gadol, so we say the general rule here of nefesh meis lo yavai means everybody, including relatives. So then the fact that Torah specifies the relatives is not necessary, because we know that we're talking about all relatives. And therefore, l'avul imay comes to tell me that a kohen could become tamei to a meis mitzvah. I'm sorry, Nazir becomes tamei to a meis mitzvah. Or alternatively, you say no. You say the general rules of al kol nefesh meis lo yavai refers to the same rules as the kohen hedyet, meaning with the exception of 7 relatives. If that's the case, then actually you need the Torah to tell me l'avul imay, because if that's the case, then we need to know that you cannot become tamei to a father or mother. That's the Gemara's argument. Like Nemer Klolos, we read 7 lines down from 48b. Nemer Klolos b'Kohen hedyet. It says general rules by Kohen hedyet, regular Kohen. The Nemer Klolos b'Nazir. It says general rules by Nazir. Ma Klolos amuris b'Kohen hedyet mitmel aviv. Af Klolos amuris b'Nazir mitmel aviv. So I say the general rules of Kohen hedyet apply to Nazir, in which case you're allowed to become tamei to a father. And therefore, how can you say how can you say that the father and mother is coming to tell me that I become tamei also to meis mitzvah? We need you to tell me the fact that you can't become tamei to your father. In other words, the father and mother really tell you that the category of akol nefesh meis lo yavai includes all relatives. In other words, the Torah gives a vague description. Everybody, he can't become tamei to anyone. What does anyone mean? Does anyone mean with the exception of the relatives or including the relatives? So if you compare Nazir to Kohen Gadol, it includes the relatives. The Kohen Gadol can't become Tamei to anybody. And then La'avul Imi makes sense, it's extra. And it's extra to tell me Meis Mitzvah. However, if you say the general rule is compared to regular Kohen, so what does the general rule you can't become Tamei to anyone mean? Can't become Tamei to anyone except for relatives. And therefore the Torah needs to say, no. That's not the right way to interpret this. By Nazir, even relatives are prohibited. And that's what the Torah says, La'avul Imi to a father and a mother. So until now, we're saying a father and mother is extra because we're comparing it to Kohen Gadol. The Gemara is saying it's not really extra. Torah needs to say a father and mother so that I don't compare it to a Kohen Hedyot. I don't compare it to a regular Kohen and say that a father and mother he could become Tamei to. So it's actually necessary for the Torah to indicate to me that a Nazir cannot become Tamei to his father or mother, even though there's a general statement, because that general statement could be generalized. But the truth is, it doesn't include relatives, just like a Kohen Hedyot doesn't include relatives. Okay, so Gemara says you're right. The father is coming. The fact that Torah has to say L'Aviv is coming to tell me that you actually can't become Tamei to your father, which isn't obvious. Even though there's a general statement by Nazir you can't become Tamei to anyone, it's not obvious that a father is included in that general statement. So therefore, father, the word L'Aviv is not extra. Okay, rather it's L'Achiv to his brother. Specifically a brother, but a brother can't become Tamei to a Meis Mitzvah. He can't become Tamei to his brother, but he could become Tamei to a Meis Mitzvah. Because once I know that he can't become Tamei to his father, I know that he can't become Tamei to any of his relatives. And then I interpret the statement of a kol meis lo yavai, a kol nefesh meis lo yavai, means all relatives are included as well. That's what L'Aviv tells me. L'Aviv indicates to me that you're prohibited to become Tamei to all of your relatives. What about the other three relatives? What are those coming to tell me? So L'Achiv tells me can become Tamei to a Meis Mitzvah. Okay. L'imai, l'gzera shava, l'kid Rebbe. The mother tells me the gzera shava of Rebbe. What's Rebbe's gzera shava? That he can't become Tamei only tumas meis. But tumas hayetzim haguf or mitzera, he could become Tamei. A Nazir is allowed to become Tamei to a mitzera or to a zav and nidi yelavis. Okay. Ula achaisai. What about a sister? Why does Torah have to tell me a sister? Like in Tanya, it's telling me the following rule. In Tanya, we learned la achaisai ma talmud leimer. What does Torah need to say, a sister? Harishaholach lishchat es pischai b'lamal es b'nai. Somebody who's going to shech the Korban Pesach or to give it. Now remember, Korban Pesach you can only shecht if you are tahar, if you're pure, or he was on his way to give his son a bris. V'shama shemeis lemeis. And he finds out that he has an obligation to bury somebody. Yachal yitma. I would think he becomes tamei. Amrit lo yitama. Torah says you don't become tamei. In other words, you continue. If you're in the middle of doing a mitzvah, you finish the mitzvah, even though you have an obligation to bury somebody. However, I would think that if he on the way he finds a meis mitzvah. In other words, the first scenario was a scenario where he had an obligation to bury somebody because either he's related or he accepted some sort of obligation to bury somebody. It doesn't mean you have to become tamei. Go hire somebody else. However, if he passes by a meis mitzvah, I think he wouldn't become tamei. The pasuk of Lachaisi tells me that even when it comes to mitzvah performance, you're on the way to do a Korban Pesach, you see a meis mitzvah, you're obligated to become tamei to bury the meis mitzvah. Okay. Let's take a brief moment to review here. Okay, so the Gemara says by Nazir, the Gemara presumes that it's not obvious Nazir is talking about a person. The only way I know Nazir is talking about a person is either because it says nefesh meis or it says lo yavai. Lo yavai means he shouldn't walk into Tumah, he shouldn't enter Tumah. Oh. The only way to enter Tumah is Tumas meis. There's no other Tumah that you can enter. Okay. Now, we said that Nazir, the Torah gives a generic statement, a kol nefesh meis lo yavai, and Torah gives 4 specific statements. 4 specific examples: a father, mother, sister, or brother. The Gemara concludes that the generic statement is not sufficient to include relatives. And therefore, the way I know that the generic statement includes relatives is from the fact that it says la'aviv, father. The Le'imai tells you the Gzera Shava of Rabbi, meaning that a Nazir is only Nazir and Kohen Gadol are only prohibited from Tumas Meis, not from other types of Tumah. La'achiv tells me that Meis Mitzvah he has to become Tamei too. And La'achaisa tells me that even certain mitzvahs, there's a permission to become Tamei to a Meis Mitzvah. Together? Okay. In the scenario of Kohen Gadol, we said that La'aviv Imai actually tells me Meis Mitzvah. The father tells me Meis Mitzvah. La'imai tells me the Gzera Shava to compare it to Nazir. Okay. Gemara says now another opinion. Rabbi Kiva says, Nefashos elu harachaykim. A nefesh is distant relatives. Sorry. The fact that Torah says nefesh, elo archaikim, these are non-relatives. These are strangers. Mace, elo hakroivim. The fact that, in other words, according to Rabbi Kiva, it's obvious the Torah is talking about that the prohibition of Nazir has to do with humans, deceased bodies. Therefore, the fact that Torah has to repeat itself and say nefesh mace, that itself comes to tell me that he can't become tamei neither to rechaikim, neither to strangers nor to relatives. If that's the case, then la'av v'le'imai are extra, because previously la'aviv told me you can't become tamei to relatives, but now according to Rabbi Kiva, that's learned out of nefesh mace. So what does la'av come to tell me? La'av v'le'imai and mitama av mitmehula meis mitzvah. He could become tamei to a meis mitzvah. La'achiv to a brother, shemai kohen gadol v'hu nazir, that if he's a kohen gadol and a nazir, he's still allowed to become tamei to a meis mitzvah, even though he's both a kohen gadol and he's a nazir. So he violates many more prohibitions. He's still allowed to become tamei to a meis mitzvah. La'achaisai to a sister, like Ketanya, but not only to that meis mitzvah doesn't only push away nazir and kohen gadol, it also pushes away some mitzvahs like the mitzvah of Korban Pesach. Okay. Gemara says, Kiva Gzera Shava Minalei. Gzera Shava to Rabbi Minalei. According to Rabbi Kiva, La'aviv Ula'ima, a father and a mother are both coming to tell you Meis Mitzvah. If that's the case, then how does he know the Gzera Shava of Rabbi to compare Kohen Gadol to Nazir with regard to the limitation that it's only Tumas Meis, it's not any other type of Tumah? Because by Nazir it says b'moisam, tumah of a dead body, and not tumah yetzim and aguf or mitzayra. So Gemara says, Amar Lach, Rabbi Kiva responds, Kivan to Amar Maram hay kohen gadol v'Nazir la'achav einim etam av mitmul meismet. So Mali kohen gadol l'chudei Mali Nazir v'kohen gadol. In other words, since la'achav tells me that if he's a kohen gadol and he's a Nazir, he cannot become tamei, he becomes tamei to a meis mitzvah, then I know that all the rules of Nazir also apply to kohen gadol. And just like the rules of Nazir are that, in other words, just like if you're Nazir and Kohen Gadol, you can't become tamei to a body, but you could become tamei to a meis mitzvah. The same thing is true of the law of b'moisam. You can't become tamei only to a deceased body, but tumah yetzim and aguf you could become tamei to. So in effect, the Kohen Gadol is included in the parasha of Nazir from the word la'achiv.
The word
La'achiv, to a brother. So in fact, the Torah doesn't need to say a brother because we know relatives are included. So the Torah has come to tell me somebody who's a Kohen Gadol and a Nazir at the same time, which effectively means that all the laws of Nazir apply to Kohen Gadol, because Kohen Gadol really is in the category of Nazir. He's brought into the psukim of Nazir. Okay. According to Rabbi Shmuel's opinion, there's no specific pasuk to tell me a Nazir who's also a Kohen Gadol. Kohen Gadol who Nazir minalei. How does he know that a Kohen Gadol that's a Nazir is included? So the Gemara says, "Kiven the shar rachmana chad lav gabi meis mitzvah, mali chad lav mali train lavin." In other words, because we know that a Kohen Gadol, that Meis Mitzvah pushes away the prohibition of Kohen Gadol, and because we also know that Meis Mitzvah pushes away the prohibition of Nazir, becoming Tummy. So what's the difference if I know both of them separately, if I know both of them together? Why would it make a difference if you're a Kohen Gadol and a Nazir? I know that Meis Mitzvah is stronger than Kohen Gadol. I know that Meis Mitzvah is stronger than Nazir. So if you're a Kohen Gadol and Nazir, it's also stronger. What difference does it make? Torah specifies it's stronger than both of them individually. Why would it make a difference if he's a Kohen Gadol and he's a Nazir together? Okay. Okay. Gmara says, what does the Torah need to say, achaisei, sister? In other words, what, 1 second. Okay, so now, 1 second. Now, if we're according to Rabbi Shmuel, once we're saying that the fact that you're Kohen Gadol and a Nazir doesn't change anything. So if that's the case, why would I think the fact that you're on your way to do a Korban Pesach is different? In other words, why can't I presume if Meis Mitzvah is so strong that even a Nazir Kohen Gadol becomes Tamei to a Meis Mitzvah? So then why would I presume that the mitzvah of Pesach is stronger than it's stronger? So the Gemara says, I mean, I would have thought Kisharach Manol Meis Mitzvah Nazir kind of Isra Laviu. Avamilo Pesach the Chorus Loyitam Elo Meis Mitzvah Kamashmalan. The Gemara says you're right. It's true that they're both lavin, but the prohibition of Korban Pesach is much more severe. And same thing is true of Bris Milah. If somebody is able to bring a Korban Pesach, meaning he's in Jerusalem and he is Tahari and he does not bring a Korban Pesach, he incurs a severe penalty for not doing so. It's kares, a heavenly prescription of death before one's time, and therefore, because and the same thing is true of Milah. If a Jew does not have a bris milah, he has the same penalty, unless he's what's called a hemophiliac. In other words, unless medically impossible, basically, it's a severe violation. So therefore, the truth is, no, Pesach and Milah are in many ways much more severe than Kohen Gadol and Nazir, which are only lavin, so to speak. They're just the regular lavin. They don't have a penalty of kares. So therefore, the Torah needs to say that no, despite the fact that Pesach and Milah are extremely severe, if one incurs a violation, it still is. There's still a prohibition there's still a prohibition of bringing the Korban Pesach. I'm sorry, catch right. The Meis Mitzvah is still more important than a Korban Pesach or Milah. Okay, a little bit of complicated Gemara. We will review this again tomorrow, when we have to continue the same Gemara, basically. So that will be the first part of tomorrow. We'll just have to review Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Shmuel. There were two methodologies for how we went through the steps of sourcing the parameters of Nazir, of what's included in the prohibition and what's not included in the prohibition of a Nazir becoming tummy. So review this again tomorrow.
It's hard to understand when, say, he's a brother or a sister, that it means other things like.
Yeah. So this is we're a bit rushed, but yeah, the truth here is that this is an example of sort of extra words being taken out of context. Clearly, the word sister with regard to Nazir was not referring to Meis Mitzvah and Pesach, right? But obviously because it's extra and sort of the inyan, the subject matter, which is Meis Mitzvah, right? Which is what the word brother, right? Not to be confused with the similar word. Because the word brother is extra for Meis Mitzvah, so we take lachais and we adapt it to a different concept, which is similar and appropriate, but not in context.